Picture this, liking something. You watch an anime and you love it. So much so, you may even consider yourself a fan, naming yourself among the lowest of the low. But you don't really have any way to show it. You don't have anything to pay tribute to your newest obsession. The court has no way of knowing you like Pochi the Rock. Well, sure, you could buy a figure, but you could also go for the cheaper option that also comes with a whole book, a manga. Manga has to have one of the slipperiest slopes when it comes to collecting. You buy one volume, want to see what happens in the next one, and repeat the process for the whole series. But why stop there? Why limit yourself to just one series? Chances are you'll like another one, so repeat the same process for that series. Then, you find out that there's a light novel and a manga for another series you like, so you might as well check out both, and before you know it, you're saying, I like Nemo, there's a manga, let's see the differences between adaptations. I've been collecting manga for as long as I can remember, as long as you don't count the first 14 years of my life canon. I was around 15 when I first became this, but it actually started earlier. I remember being in a Books A Million with my family and seeing what would be my first manga volume, the beginning of my downfall, Splatoon. This was long before I'd ever gotten into anime. I had no idea what manga was. I was still sane. Splatoon was one of my favorite games at the time, so I just had to get it, even if I had an aneurysm trying to figure out why the cover was on the back. I read it all, even if it took 20 minutes to understand I had to do it backwards. I ended up really liking it. I liked the art style, the characters, and was actually interested in seeing where the story would go. So it would be natural for me to get the second volume a couple years later when I actually wanted to read manga, not because I liked a game, but because I genuinely wanted to get into it. By the time I did get into anime, I became curious to see how the source material compared to some of my favorite shows. But I was also terrified of people knowing this is how I spent my time, so I just got more Splatoon. But this is one of the worst things you can do when starting out as a collector. Buying something you don't want. Instead, you should just find a series that you're passionate about. If you start your collection with something you're actually interested in, it will snowball from there, so start with a series you care about. For me, that series was Kaguya-sama Love is War. This is my favorite part of my collection, not just because it's my favorite manga of all time, but because it's the one I have the most connection to. I remember buying the first volume and loving it. It was so cool to see all the differences between the manga and the anime. I love seeing the story in its original form, seeing how certain scenes looked when made up of a bunch of images compared to being fully animated. It really made me appreciate each individual panel that much more, seeing all the ways it communicated what's happening to the reader. And then, the best part about it all was easily seeing stuff that didn't make it into the anime. Some of the chapters are pure gold, and it's a shame they never got animated. I loved being able to experience one of my favorite stories of all time in a completely different way, and seeing exclusive chapters was just the cherry on top. Kaguya-sama got me to appreciate not just the manga I was reading, but manga as a whole. This got me hooked into seeing how other shows I liked started out in their original form, because I started with something I like and kept sticking to what I like, which goes to show, only get it if you genuinely care about the series that much. Make collecting manga something you'll enjoy, not just a bunch of books you have no connection to lying on a shelf. But chances are, you've already watched the anime for the series. So do you start getting a volume the show hasn't covered, or start at the very beginning? Ultimately, this is a decision that comes down to personal preference. I always like starting from volume 1 and going from there. That way I get to experience content I already like in a different way, and see how it compares to the anime. Seeing chapters that didn't get covered, how the art style changes throughout the run, or just seeing general differences between adaptations are some of the pros of starting from the beginning. As for the cons, that's more volumes you have to buy if you plan on catching up. Buying manga has got to be the worst part about collecting them. You'll go to the bookstore, say your volume you want, and then make a fool of yourself at the checkout line. Bringing manga up to the cashier has got to be one of the most humbling experiences. Like, yeah, let me just take up this weird-looking series with a weird-looking cover up to Dennis and give him $15 for it. No, let's go even further. First, you have to see if they have the book you want, which just so happens to be next to a series with a title I won't even repeat. I just want Scarlet Letter, I swear. And then spending money on them can add up so fast. Like, there we go, I just spent $10 on the first volume. Time to do that 8 more times. But while this isn't the best, it could always be worse. For example, collecting physical games feels so much more different than collecting manga. A series may even span across generations, meaning a lot of these old games are no longer in print. Even then, sometimes modern games go out of print too, meaning a lot of times, you have to buy them used. It doesn't matter if you're getting them from a retro game store or online, you have no idea what the previous owner did to it. Thanks for riding on Diddy Kong Racing, Ellen! With manga, you have to make a fool of yourself to the Barnes & Noble cashier. But with game collecting, you have to hunt down the copy in some random secondhand store and hope that it doesn't cost a mortgage. While sometimes stuff like this can happen with manga, I feel like it's much less common. Even then, when it comes to buying manga, there are options. Instead of buying 2 volumes, you can just get an omnibus for cheaper. Sometimes these feel so nice to hold and read, making them a great option. Other times these are beyond uncomfortable to hold and honestly make me just want to buy the volumes separately. Sometimes these are the only English release a series may get, and while this decreases options, they're usually pretty good. Another way of getting a bunch of volumes at a time are box sets. These are pretty neat. They come in a neatly decorated box and usually have some art with them. They usually don't contain every volume in them, but if you know you want to get a bunch of volumes from a series at once, these are great. However, I feel like these are harder to store and display. I have the Nichijou box set and I've never known where to put it. Is that because my manga shelf and more so my entire room just has no space to fit nearly anything else? Probably, but even then it looks a little weird on a shelf with everything else. Which, this is one of the smaller ones. Some of these can be like twice as long and take up so much more space. Which brings me to the other bad part about collecting manga: storing them. This is my current manga shelf. While it doesn't have my entire collection, it has a good chunk of it, and I'm still shocked I got this much to fit on there. I see so many videos of people showing off their collection and the way they display them. Sometimes a volume may have the front cover on display, and then I just look over at my clown car of a shelf. Don't get me wrong, I'm very thankful for the space I have and how I've made good use of it, but I want K-On! To stand out like a sore thumb even more than it does now. Or sometimes people will put the series together with figures in neat ways, or don't have Haremi obscuring half of their shelf. I just have to stick with having the spine showing for the most part, as much as I'd like to display covers. I've always really enjoyed looking at covers and seeing what gets put on which volume. Like, why is Shirogane, one of the 2 main characters, not get his own cover until volume 20? A lot of the times the cover will just have a character on it, but I really enjoy seeing something else. Some of my favorite covers have multiple of the characters on it, almost like they're celebrating making it this far in production. While the 1 character per cover strategy isn't bad, it's easy to run out of characters fast and put them on volumes where they seem kinda out of place. Or sometimes they may be a drawing of something that happens in the volume. These are great, but sometimes they kind of end up spoiling what you'll see. But as cool as all of these covers are, it's easier to settle for function over flashiness. Now I know what you're thinking. There's an easy solution to this. A way I can read manga without worrying how I'm going to store them. A way I can read manga without having to go and buy volumes or wait for them to get delivered. A way for me to read countless chapters without them even taking up space. Reading manga online. Nope. While I'm no stranger to doing this, I typically only resort to reading manga online when there's no official English release. But as convenient as this is, it's hard for me to read manga online and not wish I could be reading a physical version. While I could always buy Japanese prints, I know better than to buy something I can't read. I'll just buy something I can't play. But even despite all of the negatives, having to buy all the volumes then find some place to put them, I still love collecting. I love rearranging my shelf so just 1 more volume can fit. I love slowly completing an entire series. I love having a physical representation of some of my favorite shows, and I love holding a story in my hands as I look at its artwork. While collecting manga can be annoying at times, the fun parts of it make it worthwhile.